Hi, and welcome back to Plan9Crunch, where every week we read from something tenuously related to the cult genre. And I, Joseph Gibson, usually find an excuse to talk about Godzilla somehow. Well, today I've plumbed the depths and come back with the most absurd collection of quaint and curious lore I think we have ever covered on this channel. In Godzilla's Monsterpiece theater, Godzilla fights the Great Gatsby, and other literary creatures such as Sherlock Holmes, Dracula, and more. And the Time Machinist also, and more. But I'll get to this in a second. First, I want to give some credentials about my relationship to the Great Gatsby IP. I have read the book multiple times and enjoyed it multiple times. Even if I have also come away with the interpretation that everybody in the book is a bad person, especially Daisy and Nick, and also that Nick is pretty clearly not straight, whether or not that was intended. And I have enjoyed the movie adaptation, starring Tobey Maguire, for a mostly faithful visualization of the novel's proceedings. For a modern literature class, I have also read an adaptation of The Great Gatsby that made Nick and Gatsby, both young trans men, called Self-Made Boys, a Great Gatsby remix, and for what it was, I liked it well enough. Gatsby purist and fan of literature battled me for that one because, well, the prose was at a baseline good and at its best moments very sophisticated and carrying through the plot twists and symbolism it was demonstrating. Some characters were just far too different from the original novel in ways that rippled across the entire text. I don't even mean trans Nick and Gatsby. Daisy was actually a well-meaning, sympathetic character who got POV segments and had an arc to earn ultimately a happy ending. That's crazy stuff. And yeah, that version has a happy ending, which is still my main issue with it. What makes The Great Gatsby interesting to me is that the tragedy in the center is timeless, but the plot details surrounding that core are pretty much tailored to the time period it was written during, and just commenting on, it is supremely difficult to capture the specific 1920s nature of it. And I also believe it is the type of story where the tragedy is inevitable, and thus the only ending that makes sense with all the other pieces there. And that is why I respect the IP as a whole. Maybe at a later date, I'll read a passage about the green light Gatsby gazes at, or the situation that seems to imply a homosexual entanglement of Nick's on page, or even Gatsby's own death page. But for right now, I am reading Godzilla Monsterpiece Theater, that in the tradition of cult genre materials from the early to mid-20th century is taking these different IPs with their marquee value and stitching them into an entertaining pulp nonsense story. Purist in me sees this as in this case, a bit of a mockery of the source material, and I can't even rely on particularly complex characterization or sophisticated prose to defend my liking of Godzilla vs. The Great Gatsby. There are multiple reasons I'm fond of this comic, however, and you will learn what they are over the course of this video. But you will have to understand that except for one plot point, it is not because of any similarity to the book. I don't know about you guys, but the first question I had when I found this book at Barnes & Noble was what? And the second question was, who would possibly make this? Tom Scioli composed the story, art, and letters of this 3-issue comic run for IDW Publishing, and the back cover credits Tom Scioli as a cult favorite comics creator, and I had never heard of Scioli before, so I did a bit of research. He tries to work in the style of famed comic artist Jack Kirby, and has worked on Fantastic Four as well as Image Comics. There's some contract with IDW Comics, as he has worked on some of their stuff since at least 2018. He is one of the hosts of the YouTube channel The Total Recall Show, which recently, as of when I'm recording this, but probably less recently when this video goes up, released a video explaining a little about Monsterpiece Theater. So before I get into the beautifully whacked out plot of this comic while reading off a couple pages for you, I will feed you a bit of authorial intent, so that if nothing else, this video is fair use. I mean, so that you understand why this comic is the way it is. According to Scioli, the cover art, front and back, is what sells the issue, and the art inside, it is Scioli's goal to build toward a jaw-dropping, surprising image. In this case, that image is on the back cover here, in the final climactic showdown, and I will try to restrain myself from spoiling it, but it is one of the most absurd things in this entire volume, and overjoys me to no end that it exists. Scioli's intent with the first issue was to hide Godzilla as much as possible and wait to reveal him in the vein of the classic movies, which is a bit strange to me, because this seems to have less in common with movies like Godzilla 2014 that play hide the Godzilla than it does with the late 70s films that would often show Godzilla at the beginning, and then develop a wacky plot for Godzilla to find himself in. I don't want to repeat too much of their video back on this channel, so I encourage you to watch their full video. I'll have the channel linked in the description. This comic begins with the courtship of Gatsby and Daisy, but then some World War I stuff. I'll show you a couple of spreads so you get the Jack Kirby-inspired style from this. And then it gets into the plot of the novel. We have the green light here. Daisy and Tom exists. Nick Carraway is essentially a sidekick for Gatsby in this issue, and Godzilla destroys stuff, separating the cast, and begins his rampage. It's Godzilla that winds up as the obstacle between Gatsby and Daisy in this one. Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, the Time Machinist, Jules Verne, Dracula, Baron von Frankenstein, a random mummy Godzilla pisses off, and Thomas Edison all weave in and out of the story. Gatsby, with the help of brilliant scientists and fictional characters, invents the G-Force and rolls out maser tanks like the classic Toho films to defeat Godzilla, who is going on a Final War-style world tour, destroying everything. But he's the only rampaging kaiju until the plot coupon allows some other fight scenes to happen. I'm not going to talk more on that. I will go into some of the finer details of the human side of the story here. I should go to page 28. That's what, sorry, 23, 248. And Nick dies. Nick Carraway dies during a rampage of Godzilla's thing. And, sorry, between pages 23 and 58 to show the evidence of that. But it was just shocking the first time for this to happen this way. Because you see, Nick Carraway in his little straw hat there witnesses Godzilla attacking, saves a cat, goes into a car. Page spread of Godzilla attacking. Jay Gatsby and the G-Force come in here. He takes a very sallow, bleeding Nick out of the car, screams for a medic, and Nick doesn't pop up again after this point. So in a way, I have read the death page of a character. It's not the character that I said I might. No, there's some dialogue between Daisy and Gatsby that confirms that Nick's not with them anymore. You can't leave without us, so you did get my letter. I told Tom that we absolutely must join you on your expedition, just as we were all together at the beginning. All except for Nick. So it seems like he's dead now, 58. Here's what's important about the novel, is that Gatsby is the protagonist of the novel, but Nick is the main character. What that amounts to is narrator versus the one the plot actually relies on, the one who, when they die, and that's explored, that's when the story ends. I found my friend Nick's manuscript telling the story of his life and, by extension, the story of his friends and family, Daisy, Tom, and even me, down to the most heartbreaking detail. I've decided, as a tribute to my good friend, to complete his work to tell the story of this moment in time, this turning point in history. So from this point on, Gatsby winds up being the protagonist and the main character, the narrator as well as the star of the show. And it progresses from there. Some characters die, other characters grow in strength and stature, size. Dracula has a plan to get Daisy because he's sort of another villain of the story. And after all said and done, after this entire venture they've gone on, this is the part that I want to highlight. I'll just read the page, then I'll explain it. Here I am, back home with love of my life. Now a dialogue tag, I haven't been in the pool all summer. There's a brave new era dawning, an era of uninterrupted prosperity. I see the whole happy century ahead and how it plays out. Let's swim. Wish I could. We're leaving East Egg, Tom and I. The 30s will be time of joy. I love you, Jay, but Tom and my life, it's just so, I don't know. The 40s will be full of peace and kindness. Be sure to write. The 50s will know only freedom and love one's neighbor. Not going to stay for a swim? It's a little cold for that. So these have been the dialogue tags juxtaposed with the narration. The 60s will be our golden age of comfort and stability, doting on our grandchildren perhaps. And Daisy drives away, leaving Gatsby alone with the cat. Gatsby dives into the pool on a bed and just lays there. He must have felt that he had lost the old warm world, paid a high price for living too long with a single dream. He must have looked up at an unfamiliar sky through frightening leaves and shivered as he found what a grotesque thing a rose is, and how raw the sunlight was upon the scarcely created grass. And he's laying there in the pool. The image is straight out of the book, the end of the book. Though, of course, he's still living here. In the sense that this book is able to reconcile the pulp action Gatsby with something a little bit closer. Sorry, the pulp action Gatsby of this story with something closer to the lost love tragedy of the book. I appreciate it a lot. And it gives you something to think about at the end of the story. That he fought against Godzilla, against Dracula, to save Daisy. And ultimately, I don't know, it's interesting. There's some stuff I haven't spoiled about this, though I've really wanted to. And I encourage you to pick this up at Barnes & Noble or at Amazon or at iwpublishing.com. The ISBN 13 is 979-888-724-2989. Thank you all for watching this video. You can follow us on YouTube here. You can follow us on our traditional blog, Plan9Crunch.com, or our Facebook page, Plan9Crunch Podcast and Blog. Also, we have a TikTok page, though whether or not there will be anything related to Godzilla or The Great Gatsby there, it's hard to say. And that's a wrap.